Shavua Tov officially to everyone. Wonderful seeing everyone today. We have a very hard, interesting perek that we're going to be learning today. We're going to be starting perek Vav and Zayin. We're going to finish Vav and Zayin, but it's going to be very difficult for us to really go through all of the psukim and all the ideas. And the reason is because the description of the Bniyat Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo builds is very, very vague. The literature, the words used are words that we don't really understand all of the, we don't really understand them. But worse than all of that, we don't really have any evidence of Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. And because we don't have that evidence, it's very difficult for us to use the psukim and try to understand the shetach, what's going on Har HaBayit. We have Binyan Hordus, but we don't have the Beit HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, and it makes it very, very difficult for us to really understand what's going on. But even worse than that, there are three accounts of what the Beit HaMikdash looks like. We have Sefer Melachim that we're going to be reading today. We have an account in Divrei Hayamim Bet as well. And for those who know the Navi Yechezkel, before he went to Bavel, he also had he must have seen the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore he also has a description of what it looks like. So putting all that together without any actual real evidence in Har HaBayit, it's very, very difficult for us to really understand what it looks like. But I'm going to do my best, really my truly best. I spent literally maybe 20 hours on really putting together a presentation to try to really show where everything was, possibly what it looked like, but also make a description of really what was there based on only Sefer Melachim. And I'll tell you why I did it that way. Because if we go into Divrei Hayamim and Hanavi Yechezkel, then we're going to have to actually start learning Divrei Hayamim and learning Yechezkel, and we don't have the time because it's taking us a lot of time just to go through Melachim. So we're going to be true to our book. We're falling in love with Sefer Melachim. So we're going to actually learn Sefer Melachim, and we're going to learn what the Beit HaMikdash looked like based on Sefer Melachim. But then again, we cannot go through every little detail because we will be here not only all day and all night, but for the next year, that's all we'll be dealing with because it took them a very long time to build. We'll see how long as well. And it's just complex because it's hard to understand, and we want to get on with Melachim. So I will do as concise as possible, but at the same time, really try to give us an understanding about what it really looked like. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm recording it, so many of you might want to refer back to it. And by the way, every week I upload the recording of our shiur. It can be found on the website. Baruch Hashem, Aviel's web there is really, making our website look more and more. It's convenient to use, good to use, efficient to use. Additionally, if you want me to send you the YouTube link to your email or to your WhatsApp, I can do that as well. So if you want to refer to it, you can, and if you missed it, you can also catch it as well. So I'm going to, now it's being recorded, so there's no reason for anybody to record. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Metsuyan. Let me just get let me put myself up here. Yofi. Okay. So Shavua Tov, we're starting. What did the Beit HaMikdash look like? So I have a background picture here, which is a very famous picture. A lot of the pictures that I took were from Machon Beit HaMikdash B'Ishur and other pictures that I got, either an approval for or that I didn't actually need to take to any issuing for it. And I'm going to go right away into some of the psukim. We're not today, it's just too much to read. I'm not going to read perek Vav and perek Zayin completely from Aleph ad Taf. But we will be reading a lot of the psukim that are relevant to us understanding what everything looked like. So let's start right away. I would like to first start, how long did Shlomo HaMelech reign for? And his kingdom, how long was he a melech for, a king for? And it's important for us because I want to know how long it took him to build the Beit HaMikdash from start to finish. Okay, so the perek Yud, Melachim Aleph perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Membet tells us, והימים אשר מלך שלמה בירושלים על כל ישראל 40 שנה. מלך 40 שנה. So Shlomo HaMelech reigned for 40 years. He didn't have any wars, as we mentioned before. He was a very rich, it's a great kingdom. Now, how long did it take him to build Beit HaMikdash and also his own king, his own palace? So in Melachim Aleph perek Tet, it says, Pasuk Yud, Vayhi mikce 20 shana, asher bana Shlomo et shnei habatim, et Beit Hashem, ve'et Beit HaMelech. So, simple math. How long did it take him to build the Beit HaMikdash and his own palace? Right? So if we have 40 shana, and then we have 20 shana, so what's the answer?
20 years.
20 years. 20 shana. It took him 20 years. Figure, if we look at it properly, out of his 40 years of reigning over Am Yisrael, half of it, 20 years, was dedicated to building Beit HaMikdash and building Beit HaMelech. He must have been, that's his job. As we mentioned before, half of his entire 40 years is dedicated to that. That's a lot of years. It's a lot of years, and that's why he needed Chokhmat Lev, because he needed to have not only the ability, but he also had to enjoy it. If he didn't enjoy it, then he wouldn't want to build it. And if he wouldn't want to build it, then he wouldn't spend all the time building it. But it must be, when we say Chacham Lev, that Hashem gave him this talent, it must also mean that he enjoyed his occupation as king, but also as an architect, as the one who builds Beit HaMikdash. And we learn from here that really everyone, as I mentioned all the time, to everyone, doesn't matter if we're 5-year-old, and doesn't matter if we're 100 years old, we want to do what we like doing. So Baruch Hashem, if Shlomo HaMelech built, his home and the Beit HaMikdash, the home of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for 20 years, it must mean that he really, really loved his occupation very much. He loved building Beit HaMikdash, and that's a lot of years. 20 years to build something. Baruch Hashem, shehu zacha, v'anachnu zachinu, Baruch Hashem, also to be able to learn today what it was. So let's also look at the division as within our Nevi'im. When you open up, half of the time that the Ktuvim spends, the words, the psukim themselves, spends on actually building, you can see that most of the psukim and the prakim really spend the time on building Beit Hashem. And only a very small amount of psukim, it's not even a full perek, that discusses building Beit HaMelech. Today we're not going to get to the descriptions of Beit HaMelech. Today we're really going to focus on Beit Hashem. But as you can see, the Navi who describes the building of Beit HaMikdash really spends lots and lots of ink. A lot of ink on paper, really giving us everything we need to know. It's very difficult to understand. Everything we need to know about building Beit HaMikdash. And really, we're talking about perek Vav, perek Zayin, some of perek Chet. It's a lot. Whereas Beit HaMelech, as you can see here, there's not a lot of ink spilled on it, not a lot of psukim spent on how Beit HaMelech looked like. Now, if I would have stopped here, and I would have said, this is the makeup of our description of Shlomo HaMelech, we would say, okay, yes, of course, that's his job. But when you look at the time frame of how long it takes Shlomo HaMelech to build Beit Hashem versus Beit HaMelech, you'll see the exact opposite. Beit Hashem takes a smaller amount of time, whereas building his own palace and the palace of others, Bat Paron, others, takes a much longer time. If we look at the Psukim, we can see, look what Melachim Aleph Perek Vav, that's what we're going to be reading today, Psukim Lamed Zayin until Lamed Chet, about Beit Hashem, Beit HaMikdash. So the Psukim say, Bashana Revi'it, meaning on the fourth year of Shlomo HaMelech, Yusad Beit Hashem Beyerach Ziv. Yerach is Chodesh, Ziv. This is very interesting. Today we count our months either according to numbers, right? Chodesh HaRishon, Bashana HaShanit, etc. B'Chodesh HaShlishi, right? We start that way. Or we have names, right? Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, which are Babylonian names. But they didn't have these Babylonian names yet, right? Because Babylon wasn't very strong yet. We first have to have Ashur, then we only have Bavel after that. Then we have Ashur again. So Bavel isn't there yet. So therefore, the months are either mentioned by number or by name. Ziv is basically the second month, but it's interesting here that it's used according to some Parshanim as names for building. When you build, it's interesting, when you build buildings, you use certain types of names for your month. So Yerech Ziv, okay? So Bashana Revi'it, on his fourth year, right? So if I highlight that, that's important for you to realize what's going on here, because we're looking at the differences between the Binyan of Beit HaMikdash versus Beit HaMelech. So Bashana Revi'it, he starts building it. When does he end? Bashana HaAchatesre, Beyerach Bul, Hu Chodesh Shmini. Okay, so if Ziv is 2, Yerach Bul is Chodesh HaShmini. So what's the answer? How long is it supposed to be? How long is it supposed to take to build the Beit Hashem? Right? Let's see. From Shana Revi'it to Shana Echatesre, Chodesh Shmini, 7.5 years. But the pasuk says, "Vayivneu b'sheva shanim." We're gonna talk about that in a minute. But either way, Beit Hashem, Beit HaMikdash takes Shlomo HaMelech between 7 years. That's what it says over here, or 7.5 years if we do the math properly. We'll relate to that in a minute. How long do you think it takes him to build Beit HaMelech? Well, there's a pasuk. The pasuk in perek Zayin, pasuk Aleph says, "Ve'et beito bana Shlomo 13 shana, vayechal et kol beito." Interesting how, as far as the psukim spent on ink to describe Beit HaMikdash takes much more room, whereas Beit HaMelech, not that many psukim. But as far as the time frame, Beit HaMikdash takes him much shorter versus Beit HaMelech. Two possibilities, and this is what we always do. We try to show the two possibilities is, who are you, HaMelech Shlomo, right? We said there's two Shlomos. Here also we can see two Shlomos as well. On the one hand, let's start with the negative so we can end on the positive. On the negative, we can say, Shlomo HaMelech obviously cares more about his own home because he spends only 7 or 7.5 years on building Beit Hashem. But on his own home, he invests and he makes sure that the decoration is wonderful, and he builds and he invests and everything 13 years because he is more invested in his own home. We can read it that way. It's definitely possible. But that's a negative aspect of Shlomo HaMelech. And it might go hand in hand with the Shlomo that we've been talking about, who is very much into himself, his own chokhmah, showing the world how smart he is, showing the world how powerful he is. That's Shlomo HaMelech, not Shlomo Shaliach Hashem. So let's now look at the positive, right? The positive is that he's so invested in Beit Hashem that he puts all of his energy and everything. He takes mas from the people because he so much wants to finish the Beit HaMikdash as soon as he can, so that he can have a Beit HaMikdash, so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could lishkon be'am Yisrael. And that's why he ends it it takes a much less time to build it, because it's more important. He's investing every hour and every minute of the day to finish, whereas his own home, he doesn't care about it so much. Therefore, it takes them a long, long time. It's kind of like kablanim who don't really care about the avodah. They'll take a long time, but if they know they'll get paid, they'll finish quickly. So we can see those two things. So Shaliach Hashem, Shlomo HaMelech Shaliach Hashem, is the one who's building it very quickly, methodically, but quickly, because he wants to have the Shekhinah already amongst Am Yisrael. So those two aspects are very important for us to realize. Again, as we've been looking at Shlomo HaMelech, we see Shlomo HaMelech, the human being, the person, versus Shlomo HaMelech, the person, but also Shaliach Hashem. V'zeh chashuv to realize this very, very important distinction. Now, as I mentioned before, let's go for a second to see this discrepancy.
Rabbi.
Again.
Is it possible that the Navi, even though he spent so much time on the Beit Melech, that the Navi wasn't thrilled with that, and so he gave him very little space in the text?
That he wasn't thrilled with him building his own home?
Devoting so much attention to his home. So he gave him short shrift in the Sefer.
Ken, yes, so that would go hand in hand. You're right. What we could say is that if the Navi, Yirmiyahu, if the Navi actually was upset at Shlomo HaMelech, the human being that spent so much time building his own home, therefore he made sure that as far as the ink spent on the description is much more, it's much less than on Beit HaMikdash, definitely. But that would answer that he's actually talking about Shlomo the person and not Shlomo HaMelech, Shliach Hashem. And that works very well. So let's go back now to the discrepancy between how long it took to really build Beit HaMikdash. So as I mentioned before, Melachim Aleph, perek Vav, says like this: Bashana revi'it b'chodesh ziv hu chodesh hasheni limloch Shlomo al Yisrael vayiven bait l'Hashem. So when did he start? In year 4, right? Bashana revi'it. Now, in perek Vav, in pasuk lamed chet, it says, Ubashana ha-11 b'yerach bul, which is the chodesh hashmini, kala habayit lechol dvarav ulechol mishpatav. And that's Bashana ha-11. So let's just do quick math. Between 4 and 11, we have how many years? 7. But we have between chodesh hasheni up here and chodesh hashmini 6 years, 6 months. So really, it's 7.5 years. Nachon? Everyone is following simple math, okay? Yet the pasuk says, "Vayivneu sheva shanim." So either Yirmiyahu Navi or either the Navi did not know math, which I doubt that that's possible, or there's a reason for sheva shanim. So barur lanu that there's a reason. Not only that, but if you look at also perek chet pasuk bet, it says, "Vayikalu et hamelech Shlomo kol ish Yisrael." The Chag was also Chodesh Hashvi'i. The time when they were, celebrating the Hakama, Beit HaMikdash happened to be HaChodesh HaShevi'i. So what is so important? Well, of course, we know that in Judaism, 7 is very, very important. Shiv'a Yemei HaBri'ah, Shesh Yemei Bri'ah with Melacha, and the last one, Shiv'a, is Shabbat Kodesh, which is the Siyum of the Bri'ah. And we know from many, many places that the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash are connected Briat HaOlam. So it's important for the Navi to make sure that even though as far as the actual number is concerned, it took 7.5 years, as far as we're concerned, as far as the Ruchaniyut part, it's important for us to note Vayivneu Sheva Shanim, because 7 is important. But even more important than that, it also seems, for those who actually delve into the Bniyah of the Mishkan, according to many, many deot, also took 7 months. Because we know that 40 days after Matan Torah, he comes down, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down, Chet HaEgel. When does he go back up? When does Moshe Rabbeinu go back up to Har Sinai? We just had that on Yom Shishi, Rosh Chodesh Elul. And according to the Midrash, on Rosh Chodesh Elul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu biser leMoshe Rabbeinu about the Mishkan, even though Motzei Yom Kippur, he told him to go down and Letzavot. But the idea of the Mishkan was in Rosh Chodesh Elul, and those who go into Parashat Truma and later on Vayakel Pekudei will note Matai Hukam Mishkan. When was the Mishkan erected up, built? Aleph Nisan. So a simple math from Rosh Chodesh Elul to Aleph Nisan. What do we have? Also 7 months. So it's important for the Navi to make sure that the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash are parallel, not only as far as what it represents, which is the Shekhinah, but also as far as the number 7, because 7 is important. It's Briyat HaOlam, and that's why we have the Mishkan, and also we have the Beit HaMikdash, HaRishon veHasheni as well. So we see there's no coincidences within our Torah. Everything is done for a reason, and there's a good reason for it. Now,
but the question: why mention the months? If he doesn't mention the months and he just says in the 4th year, and then he says in whatever year, it doesn't. He doesn't have to say that it's the 2nd month in the 4th, whatever, and then we don't have the 6 months, and works out 7 months perfectly, 7 years perfectly. Why did he bedafka put it so that it isn't 7, but it's 7.5?
Shela Tova. One of my rabbeim once said, because that way we could actually do a chakira and drisha and actually reach the conclusions that we just reached. Our Torah purposely tries to insert different things into our text in order to give us the opportunity to learn it properly. If it would just be white on, black on white, we would learn it, but we wouldn't invest time in it. We would just take it for granted. Whereas here, we're trying to really learn it and really come up with something. And we see, as we just did now, 7 years, 7 months. Not only that, but there's a de'ah also, the gra, written down by the Ktav Kabbalah, basically says also that it took 7 weeks as well. There's just differences of opinion, but either way, the idea of 7 is important in the Biniyah of the Beit HaMikdash and the Mishkan, which mirrors the Briyat HaOlam. Now, most of us know Parashat Truma Tetzaveh, Vayakel Pekudei. We know what the Mishkan looked like. There's lots of books about the Mishkan, what it looked like, the Yeriot and everything, but not many books have been written on how the Beit HaMikdash looked like, because it's so difficult. It's very, very, very hard to understand the text. So right now, we're going to really try to go ahead and delve into what really the Beit HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech looked like. As bo natchil. First of all, this is a tmuna, not mine, but I really searched to find a picture of the Beit HaMikdash cut open so we can see what goes on inside. Now, there's a lot of things here that is not amiti. No, not everything here is correct. I will letaken et hadvarim very soon. But either way, Beit HaMikdash is divided into 3. We have the Azara, which is the area over here. This is the Mivne. This is the Mivne of the Beit HaMikdash, the building itself. Outside of the building is the Chatzer, and we call it the Azara. This is incorrect. Obviously, there's a ramp. I'm going to fix that as we go forward. This is where the Mizbach HaOlah was. Soon we'll see what this is, and we'll see what all these things are. The second part was a Kodesh, or other known as the Heichal, which is the inner part, the first part of the Mivne of the Beit HaMikdash. And the deeper room, all the way inside, is called Kodesh HaKodashim, or the Dvir. Another name for it, we'll see in a minute, the Shlomo Melech calls it Dvir. So we have 3 parts to the Beit HaMikdash. We have the Azara, we have the Heichal, Kodesh, and the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Dvir. Now, interesting, the Mivne itself, this area over here, is only divided into 2. Kodesh and Kodesh HaKodashim. Why is this area, the Azara, not part of the Mivne? And I wrapped my mind, the same thing also happens in the Mishkan. The Chatzer HaMishkan is where the Korbanot are, but the Mivne of the Mishkan itself is the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim. So, based on not many Parshanim, some Parshanim, basically try to say that, as we mentioned before, and this is why I brought it, it was important, that the number 7 is important because it mirrors Briyat HaOlam. So if we think about these 2 rooms, the Heichal and the Dvir, Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim. In the beginning of Briat HaOlam, there were two things that were given to Adam v'Chava. We have two trees, two special trees. Number one, the first one is Etz HaChaim, and the second one is Eitz HaDa'at, Tov v'Ra. Now, this is just an opinion. What would happen if we said that the Heichal mirrors Eitz HaDa'at? And there's a reason for it, because we have the menorah there, we have the Mizbeach HaZahav in there, we have the Lechem HaPanim, which is all about Da'at in a way. And the inner one, the Dvir, the Kodesh HaKodashim, mirrors Eitz HaChaim. Now, what was so special about Eitz HaChaim? So I wrote it down about Eitz HaChaim. Eitz HaChaim had, if you remember, Elahat Cherev HaMitHapechet, and Kruvim HaShomrim Alav. Leval HaAdam Yikanes Ve'yirtze Gam Chaim. Hashem says, now that Adam and Chava ate from Eitz HaDa'at, they're going to want to eat from Eitz HaChaim too. So what does Hashem do? There's a Cherev Alahat HaMitHapechet, and Kruvim that are guarding Eitz HaChaim. In a way, it mirrors the Aron HaEdut, and the Kruvim that are guarding the Aron HaEdut, and the incense that when the Kohen HaGadol goes in once on Yom HaKippurim, he could die. Eitz HaChaim. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. So it wasn't except, I think there was 6
I'm just going to mute everyone. So if we look at it that way, mamash, it makes sense now why we have the Heichal and the Dvir, because it mirrors a tikkun. Eitz HaDa'at is where we do some avodah because we have the knowledge, whereas Eitz HaChaim we're not allowed to go into. That's Kodesh HaKodashim, besides a Kohen HaGadol on Yom Kippurim as a tikkun shelan. So it's a nice way of looking at everything. But let's go actually into seeing what this really looks like Beveit HaMikdash shelan. So as you see, I fixed over here, I put a ramp over here instead of the madrigot, and I also put in different of the kelim to fix it up to make sure it's right. Okay, so this is basically an open view of the Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. And we're going to go through the important areas for us to really understand what's going on in the Beit HaMikdash. So let's start. The first mention of the Binyan Beit HaMikdash is our perek Vav, Pasuk Gimel. And it tells us about an ulam. There's an ulam right over here. What is this ulam? V'ha'ulam al penei ha'ichal, habayit, 20 ama orko al pnei rochav habayit, 10 ba'ama rochbo al pnei habayit. So I'm going to go back for a second. Whoops. I'll go back. It's basically talking about this area here. It's a little mirpeset, right? Now, it has if you envision how the closing this all in, it's kind of like a little area, and Shlomo calls it ulam. It's the knisat to the bait. Truth is, on some of the houses and homes and apartment buildings on Jabotinsky, you have knisot that way. We have like a really nice big area that has like a little gagon, a little a ceiling. Go in. So this is called an ulam according to Shlomo HaMelech. Okay, and that's why. What?
Yachin and Boaz were on this ulam?
Ken, we'll talk about Yachin and Boaz very soon. Ken, you can see here, we'll talk about these amudim in a minute. Yes, this is the ulam. Now, if you look at the description, 20 amah is from here to here, because that's the entire rochav of the entire bait. And how rachav is it? It's only rachav 10 ba'ama over here, between this area over here. So this is called the ulam. You didn't know it existed. Some of you didn't know. Well, now we know. So we have the Azara, we have the Heichal, Kodesh, and the Dvir Kodesh HaKodashim. And now we have this new area that we might have not known, or maybe we didn't know, called an Ulam. An Ulam, not the way we envision what an Ulam is, this huge party area. Ulam, a small area where there's a Knisa Michubedet, a respected entrance to Beit HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's number one. Let's go forward and really delve a little bit more into something also very interesting that you might not have known. The second description that's important for us to know is all the way up here, this area over here. What are these? Anybody give a guess? You can read if you want. Windows. There are windows in the Beit HaMikdash. As we read in perek Vav, pasuk Daled, Vayas labayit chalonei shkufim atumim. We have windows. Windows in order to have beautiful light from the outside, me'ashemesh, aval atumim. And also b'derech nes, we had no pigeons, and there's like a lot of nisim. We're going to talk about it, not today. But such great nisim happened in this Beit HaMikdash. So the next interesting aspect of Beit HaMikdash is that there were windows. I mean, everybody likes to have windows. You want to have an area where it's light, full of light. So the Beit HaMikdash was full of natural light. There was no electricity. There was no electricity, yet we did have another kind of light. We had two lights, if you remember. We have lights from the menorah, and also one more from the menorah tamid, nera tamid. Two different things, but that's not in order to give light. That's in order to be a beacon to everyone looking from the outside. But as far as light inside, we had these chalonot, shkufim, and they were shakuf in order to ensure that light can go into the Beit HaMikdash. And there were 5 on both sides, and that way we have light. But again, it was only light in the heichal, in the Kodesh HaKodashim, not in the Dvir, in the Kodesh, but not in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Okay, so that's an important structural thing that we might have not known, but we do know. It's important for Shlomo HaMelech to make sure that we have those in there. Let's go to the next.
How was it shakuf and atum at the same time?
Well, no, atum means that it wasn't open. You couldn't open it. There was no need for air coming in or going out. It was atum as far as sealed, but it was shakuf in order to make sure that you can have light that goes in and out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one that is important for us to realize so we can see what everything is built out as is this area over here. We're going to show that there is a ma'atefet, a surrounding wall, very thick, called the Kir Habayit. So in perek Vav, pasuk Hey, as we keep on going through our psukim, Vayiven al Kir Habayit, Yatzia Saviv. Again, the word Yatzia is not really understandable. Parshanim say it means a tzela, not Yatzia. And as you can see here, there's a Kri Uchtiv, Yatzua, Yatzia. Either way, Parshanim mean tzela. That's what it means. A tzela sviv ha'tikirot habayit saviv. So around, if you can envision, around the entire bayit, which is basically this area over here. So it ends over here, right? This is the kir of the actual heichal, right? But there was another deeper or exterior wall called the kir habayit. Now we'll see in a minute what's inside, okay? But either way, this kir habayit was meant to ensure that when somebody gets close, including the Kohanim, they don't touch the actual wall of the Heichal. You can't touch the walls of the Heichal, Kal v'chomer, not the walls of the Kodesh HaKodashim over here. Therefore, there was an extra added kir, an extra wall to ensure harchaka. Now, Shlomo the Melech doesn't want to just waste space. What's he going to use between this wall and this wall? So he uses it as an area for a machsan, an area to store things. How do we know? It says in perek Vav, pasuk Vav until Yud. I didn't quote the entire psukim because we won't understand all of them. We have to use parshanim, but I took the important milim. And it says, first of all, how thick, how wide it is, how long. Chamesh ba'ama rochba, that's from here to here. This is chamesh ama, okay? כי מגרעות נתן לבית סביב חוצה לבלתי אחוז בקירות הבית, explains what I just explained to you, to make sure that people don't touch the actual wall, ויאחוז את הבית בעצי ארזים, full of atzim, the entire area between his arazim, and there was knisat here, basically it was a place to store important articles and ornaments in order to provide what they needed. A machsan, to make sure that we have what we need when we need it. So that's also important to note that there was an extra added wall to ensure we don't touch the actual chilul kodesh of the kir of the heichal, which is the kodesh. Let's go now forward to the next important part of the binyan Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. So I'm going closer inside. We're zooming into the actual place now.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi, where are the instructions for all this, the way Bezalel got his for the other thing? Where are the divine instructions for this?
You said Bezalel or Shlomo?
No, Bezalel was Mishkan. Where are the divine instructions for this?
So that's a very good question, and the Gemara discusses halacha Moshe miSinai, Masoret mi Moshe Rabbeinu, and I'm going to go back to your question,
Okay,
because if you look carefully, you'll see here. I'll just show you many lechem apanim, and not just one menorah, but many menorot. There's actually 10 menorot. I only put in 5. Just of lack of space, I didn't want to crowd it in there, but you will see in a minute that he actually added to more than what the Mishkan had, and we're going to ask on that, how could he lehosif? It says lo tosifu. How could he lehosif? The answer is halacha Moshe miSinai, Masoret Moshe Rabbeinu, and we'll discuss that very soon. So let's talk about zooming into this heichal. How big is the heichal? So Shlomo HaMelech tells us exactly how big the heichal is. Vayiven et 20 ama mi yarketei habayit, from the area over here. This is yarketei habayit. This is the ulam, if you remember. This is yarketei habayit. So from here all the way to here, we have from here to here we have 20 ama, just like the ulam. 20 ama, okay. Ve'arba'im ba'ama haya habayit. From here to here, 40 ama. So it's 20 by 40. That's the godel of our heichal. Okay, it's about the godel of our heichal. Let's go forward now a little bit more into the actual areas. So now, if we discuss the heichal, the next we want to discuss is the Kodesh HaKodashim. So this is the Kodesh HaKodashim over here. Okay, this is the Kodesh HaKodashim. Now, I don't know if there were steps there, if it was a ramp, or if it was straight. This picture shows steps. In my opinion, only, I don't think there were steps there. Don't know why the artist put steps, but he did. I couldn't find a way to get rid of them, but either way, I don't think there were steps. So this is the area of the Kodesh, and Shlomo HaMelech calls it Udvir. Dvir is also one of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayiven lo mibayit ledvir lekodesh HaKodashim. Let's read what the pasuk Yutet says. Udvir betoch, meaning inside the furthest part into this bite, is called the dvir. Pnima hechin letiten sham et aron berit Hashem. This is the aron that was put in the dvir, the Kodesh HaKodashim. How big is Kodesh HaKodashim? It's a cube. It's a cube. It's 20 by 20 by 20. 20 ama orech ve20 ama rocha ve20 ama komato. And the entire tzipui, just like the Eichal here, vaytzapeu zahav sagur vaytzaf mizbeach arez. And the insides are from arzei halevanon. Okay, so it's important to note, full of gold and also full of atzei erez. Now we understand how everything here is made out of atzei erez. And that's why it was so important for Shlomo HaMelech to go up and get the most meshubach etzim, because he, as an architect, wanted to ensure the best of the best. Ve'et kol habayit, all the interior, tzipa zahav ad tom kol habayit, ve'chol hamizbeach asher ladvir tzipa zahav. Everything is dripping in gold. Gold is shiny. It's beautiful, but it's also, we'll see later on how it uses also the importance of shin habim. Avalo le'achshav, we'll see that later. Okay, so that is the interior of the Kodesh HaKodashim. Let's go and zoom out to something a little bit beautiful that many of us might not have noticed. Okay, let's talk about the kruvim. Did I skip something? Okay. Okay, now, this you might not have known, but the kruvim were stationed in a very, very particular way. Let's read perek vav, pasuk kaf gimel, until kaf chet. Vayas badvir, shnei kruvim, atzei shamen, 10 amot komato. The gova was komato. I'm not going to go into exactly the dimensions because it's a little bit difficult to understand them. But as you remember before, when I noted Eitz HaChaim, we also have the shnei kruvim sheshamru al eitz hachaim. I think that's a great perush of explaining why we have these kruvim here. Vayiten et hakruvim betoch habayit hapnimi, inside here. Now, simu lev, look at this very interesting detail that many don't know this detail. Vayifresu et kanfei hakruvim, vatiga kenaf ha'echad bakir. One of the knafayim, one of the wings, was actually touching the actual wall of the Kodesh on the left over here. And the other one also, you can't see it here because of the delet, the mezuzah here, but this wing also was touching this door as well. And the wings in between here were also touching. So you basically have a continuance between one side and the other side, including the back as well. Let's read it inside. ויתן את הכרובים בתוך הבית הפנימי, ויפרסו את כנפי הכרובים, ותיגע כנף האחד בקיר, וכנף הכרוב השני נוגעת בקיר, over here, ושני כנפיהם אל תוך הבית נוגעות כנף אל כנף, ויצף את הכרובים זהב. I don't know exactly why it's important to have everything touching, but the only thing I can think of is that there's only an achdut there's only a oneness in Kodesh HaKodashim that represent the Kodesh Baruch Hu. There's a oneness of everything. So you wouldn't say there's one Kuvim, there's two Kuvim, three Kuvim, doesn't matter. It's oneness. Even though there's two, everything is basically one. So that's a nice detail that you might not have noticed that we have in our Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. Let's go to the next important detail. The next important detail are, as I mentioned before, these dlataim, these dlatot. Again, Atzei Shamin Ha'ayil Mezuzot Chamishit. Beautiful. Again, these are not understandable what it really means. Atzei Shamin Ha'ayil Mezuzot Chamishit. Some of the Parshanim have a hard time explaining, but either way, the gist is that they were beautiful doors that separated between the Heichal over here and the Dvir inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. Ushte Dlatot Atzei Shamin Ve'kala Alehem Mikleot Kruvim. There were beautiful decorations on these doors. Ufturei tzitzim v'tzipa zahav. We know that means, it was mitzupeh zahav. Vayared ala kruvim ve'ala timrot et hazahav. Really gorgeous. Must have been very, very, very beautiful. Let's continue to go to the next important thing, something that somebody mentioned. If we're already talking about dlatot, let's talk about the next dlatot of the Heichal. We're going to talk about the ones over here. So here, unlike the ones in the Dvir, which were solid gold over here, mitzupeh zahav, the ones over here in Melachim Vav, perek pasuk lamed gimel, v'chen asa lefetach harichal mezuzot atzei shamen me'et revit. So we had mezuzot here that were made out of wood, atzei shamen. So we had mezuzot, and then we had the beautiful doors as well. Shnei dlatot atzei broshim. Remember we discussed that it wasn't just atzei arzei levanon, but also broshim. So this is where he's using the broshim. Did he intend to use broshim? I don't know. But maybe Shlomo HaMelech is saying to himself, look, I bought such great types of etzim, I might as well use other great etzim as well. So he uses the atzei broshim. Shnei tzilaim hadelet ha'achat. We see they're divided into two. 1, 2, kind of like an accordion. Glilim u'shnei klaim hadelet hashenit glilim. It was opened like an accordion, mamash. It wasn't just a door that moved from one side to the other. It was an accordion. And the last but not least, also ornaments, beautiful decorations. Ve'kala kruvim, again the kruvim. Ve'timrot ufturei tzitzim v'tzipa zahav miyushar ala michukeh. I don't know what that means exactly. Yesh parshanim, but the gist is that it looked similar to this, but a little bit bigger. Okay, that's to the shmo between the ulam over here and the heichal. So that's another interesting area to note. Let's go to something very, very me'anyen. And this is something that Chazal don't really understand either. And it's something that Tzipi had mentioned. There are 2 amudim that were in the beginning. Again, these amudim can reflect also etz hadat, etz hachaim. It can reflect, shomrei malachim, shomrei habayit shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Either way, they have names. It says like this: Vayakem et ha'amudim le'ulam ha'heichal. These are in the ulam. According to this picture, it really did a good job. Le'ulam ha'heichal, in the ulam. Hayemani Vayikra et shmo Yachin. They actually had names. Yachin. Vayakim et ha'amud ha'asmali, that you can't see over here just because it's cut off, is called Boaz. Anybody want to venture the reasons for this? Sukaf Aleph. So one, we might possibly say, it's possible to say as a perush to say, if you put Yachin and Boaz together, there's a pasuk that goes, Yachin kiseh David u'mamlachto u'lezaro ad olam, and the other one is Be'oz Hashem yesamach melech. So the possibility of putting them together, it's basically going back to David HaMelech, who wanted to build the Beit HaMikdash, wasn't allowed to build the Beit HaMikdash, as yesh zikaron for David HaMelech with these amudim. Again, Yachin kisei David u'mamlachto, that's why it's called Yachin, and Boaz as Be'oz Hashem yesamach melech of David HaMelech over here. So we can see kind of Shlomo HaMelech ensuring that David Avdi, that David his father, has a gushpanka in the Knesset. He wasn't able to build it himself, but at least there's something bezichro. So that's a very nice thing to know about our Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. Let's go forward to something very interesting. This little big, very large, you can see it's very big, pond of water. Anybody want to guess what this is and what it's called? So, I'll tell you what it's called. It's in perek zayin, not perek vav. It's called a yam mutzak. That's what it's called. It's called a yam mutzak. What is this yam mutzak? So let's read. I'm reading in pasuk kaf gimel. ויעש את הים מוצק 10 באמה משפתו עד שפתו עגול סביב ו5 באמה קומתו. That's the size, the diameter. עומד על 12 בקר 3 פונים צפונה, ימה, נגבה ומזרחה. So you have three, you can't see them, 3 over here and 3 over here. 12. Why do we have 12? Probably כנגד 12 שבטים. Okay, possible. ועוביו טפח ושפתו כמעשה שפת כוס פרח. What do we need this water for? Where did the water come from? So when you venture into all the parshanim, they all try to figure out what's going on here. Where does the water come from? Probably made geshem. How did it get there? Either straight from the Shemaim or there were ta'alot that went on top of it. And if you see over here, we're going to see in a minute what these little things are. They have little trolleys. And basically, there's a possibility that this was water that was given to all these just for the tahara of the kohanim. We know that avodat kohanim was also always supposed to be betahara. So in order to ensure that they always have ma'im chayim, there was a big beit kibul over here to have all the ma'im chayim, mei teva, mei Hashem, and it was given to the areas over here. These are called the little mechonot. So you could see here, there's a little water in order to ensure that there's always enough water. There were 10 of them, 5 on this side and 5 on the other side of the mivneh. And the psukim say, Vayas et ha-mechonot. These are mechonot, 10 nechoshet 4 v'ama v'chulei, kazot asa 10 mechonot v'chulei v'chulei v'chulei. Okay, so basically we see that there's making sure, Shlomo making sure that there's plenty of water for tahara. Let's go on to the next important things. We get to perek zayin of the kelim ha'ikariim. Vayas Shlomo et kol ha'kelim asher beit Hashem et mizbach hazahav. Mizbach hazahav was right here, a couple amot before the entrance to the dvir. Okay, this is what it looked like. It was the incense. It's where they were the ktoret. Okay, that's over here. And the second part over here, if you notice, we also have the lechem hapanim. Now, if you count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, possibly 10, maybe 13. Lechem hapanim, if we start comparing to Divrei Yamim and other sources, we'll talk about it in a minute. The next part, besides the lechem hapanim, I apologize, I'm going quickly, but Mincha is a little earlier today, 7:05, so I'm going to go a little quicker. We also have here the menorot hazahav. Menorot hazahav, we see there were 10 of them. ואת המנורות 5 מימין, there are 5 over here, 5 משול, another 5 on the other side over here, לפני הדביר, again, this is the menorat hazahav. It looks exactly like the one we have in Mishkan, but there were 10 of them. In a minute, I'll refer to what I think Rosie had asked about why is it more than Mishkan? How is it possible? So this is zooming out to see what it really looked like. It's pretty amazing what Shlomo HaMelech built. And last but not least, from Divrei Amim, I promised not to actually go into Divrei Amim, but I had no choice because this is not even mentioned in our prakim. Mizbeach HaNechoshet is not mentioned. It's only mentioned in Divrei HaYamim. We'll talk about that another time, why it's not mentioned in our Prakim and Melachim. Either way, Vayas, Mizbeach HaNechoshet, 20 אמות אורכו, ו20 אמות רוחבו, ו10 אמות קומתו. I fixed the things over there. This is basically how it looked if we zoom out to the whole thing. This area is Beit HaAmudim, possibly, we're not really sure. That's why it's in another color here. But either way, we can see here, if we go back to our the way things look, let's just refer, since I'm losing my time here. So Rabbeinu Bachye and Yalkut Shimoni really talk about how is it possible that we had 10 menorot, we only had 1 menorah in the Mishkan. We had many more lechem apanim versus the one that we had in the Mishkan as well. So I have the Yalkut Shimoni that Rabbeinu Bachye brings, and he basically says like this. First of all, it's not Baal Tosif because he says, Masoret mi Moshe Rabbeinu, that this is what he had to do. But why? Why do we need so many menorot and why do we need so many lechem apanim? So there are 2 possibilities that is brought down by the Yalkut Shimoni that is quoted by the Rabbeinu Bachye. One, in the Midbar, the Mishkan was B'derech Nes. And when there's a Derech Nes, there's no need for many, many, many different kelim. One is enough because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is making sure everything is Nohe Kashura, says the Rabbeinu Bachye B'Shem Yalkut Shimoni. But when we're living in a time when the Hanhaga is by a Melech, the Hanhaga is Hanhagat Tivit, a natural leadership, not by Hashem, we need more Shefa. We need more of everything. We need more menorot. We need more lechem apanim, says Rabbeinu Bachye. Also from a financial, kalkali point of view, and also from a Torani, we need more Torah, we need more lechem apanim, we know what one says. But that is the Rabbeinu Bachye. The Meshech Chochma brings a beautiful perush. He says that the Mishkan was smaller. It was much smaller than the Beit HaMikdash. And because it was smaller, there wasn't any room to put that many kelim. Whereas when we have more room, if I just put 1 kli, it looks too small. It looks too big with something small. So therefore, Shlomo wanted to fill it with more menorot, more things. But like I said before, based on the Gemara, it's not done kebal tosif, but rather as Masoret and Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm just going to show you something very interesting before I end. This is what the Beit HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech looked, basically only this part, because this is Beit HaMudim we did not discuss. Now look at the difference between that and the Binyan Hordus. So much more grandiose, so much more grand. Look at exactly what it's built. Everything is so much more bigger and gaudier and everything. So I just wanted to show you the differences between the Pashtut of Shlomo HaMelech, even though it wasn't Pashtut, it was gorgeous, Mitzupeh Zahab and everything based on that. So let me just unshare. So that is basically what we have. It's pretty amazing. I went really quickly because of the time, but as you can see, you can refer back to this from the recording that I hope to get up, but you see how amazing this Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo built and how much thought went into it and what it looks like. And we have an ulam, we have this kiyor, we have this pond of water, Mayim Chaim, we have so many more menorot that maybe you didn't know that we had. And the kruvim touching all the areas, and we had the ulam, and we had the boaz and yachin that symbolizes the hemshech of malchut Beit David, etc. Baruch Hashem, we can see such wonderful things in our perek. Yet, if you actually after this whole hakdama, because it only is hakdama, now if you read perek vav and perek zayin, you'll probably understand it so much better because visually you can visualize what it really looked like. So, Shavua Tov to everyone. I hope it helped to put things in perspective and to really see the beauty of what we have.